Welcome to Times Radio.
Hello, thank you.
Hello, Jonathan. I think the main task of this is to highlight what's going on, but also to try and be practical about the way the industry copes at the moment and also how it might return. It's fair to say that times are tough at the moment for you. I was looking at your Twitter profile earlier, and you've sort of listed your establishments with RIP in brackets written afterwards, and that that paints a kind of small amount of the picture for you as far as you're concerned. How are you focusing your energies at the moment? What are the important things that we need to know that you're focusing on?
Well, for my sector, the big challenge is the mounting rent debt that has been building up over the last sort of 10 months, when we've been allowed to open for some of that, but not for much of it. And the government has been providing some protection to business tenants by legislating for a lease forfeiture moratorium to stop landlords changing the locks and repossessing premises. But they've not been dealing about the underlying debt. And at the end of March, that moratorium expires unless it's extended. It's also when the business rates relief expires and the VAT break runs out. And it's kind of like a cliff edge that we're looking at. No one in the hospitality expects to be open again by the end of March. We're hearing that we'll be locked down until then. And so it's looking really grim. And that 10,000 closures that you mentioned is, I think, an underestimate of what's actually happened. And it's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. And the really sad part of what's happened is that has led to 640,000 job losses. That's over a fifth of the people who were working in hospitality last year. And again, I think there's many more. And when this first started, I think everybody in our industry was looking at, 1 million plus, 2 million possibly job losses. And 50% of the people who work in hospitality are aged 16 to 24. We're a very important industry for jobs for young people. And that is just devastating to their futures. And at the moment, we don't know when we can reopen and what it's going to be like when we do reopen. So it's very difficult to plan and strategize and create new and come up with new ideas and new ways of operating, new concepts. And and while it's all still so up in the air, and we don't really know where we're going to be and when we can start again.
On the front page of the Telegraph tomorrow will be a story about how the paper has learnt the government has quietly extended lockdown laws. This is as the Telegraph understand it. They've extended lockdown laws to give councils the power to close pubs, restaurants, shops and public spaces until July the 17th. That's not a date that will be welcome as far as you're concerned, but it does, goodness me, perhaps give us an indication of how little of the way through this pandemic we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's becoming apparent, isn't it, in the last sort of few days and perhaps week, that, the end is not in sight despite the arrival of the vaccine. I think what's been most disconcerting for me and a lot of my colleagues is that when we were allowed to open last year on the 4th of July, I think hospitality demonstrated as an industry that we were COVID safe, COVID secure, all of the Public Health England data, all of the ONS statistics showed that infection transmission was not happening in hospitality venues because we were carefully managed, very hygienic spaces, managing distancing, staff in masks, all of the kind of like sanitizing and everything else going on. And we feel that we should have been really held up as an industry as like, this can be done. You can operate in a safe and secure way. And instead, when things started to turn, when the schools reopened and everyone went back to the universities, and obviously infection transmission happened again because of that, they started to scapegoat our industry. And it feels like now we've kind of, from being in a position of being like lauded and looked after at the very beginning, and the Chancellor especially came out with some fantastic measures in the first couple of months, we feel like we've just been abandoned and pushed to one side. And that's particularly true for the nighttime sector. Nightclubs and music venues and all of this, they have been locked down since late March. They're going to be locked down for more than a year. And in most cases, with very few exceptions, they've had nothing. I mean, my business, let me give you an example of my business. We turned over £15 million in 2019. We employed 90 full-time staff, up to around about 450 part-time and with events. And I had 4 very successful venues in East and South East London operating, very successful businesses, completely viable. And we have not had a single penny of support from the government.
Why not?
The furlough scheme has been fantastic for our teams, our
Okay.
people, and kept them on a kind of life support, But we've not had a single penny. We've not had a penny grant. We've not been able to get any of the business loans, the business interruption loan scheme cash. We've not had a penny, and that's
Why
just going
not,
to lead
Jonathan?
to inevitable liquidations.
Why haven't you been able to access any of that help?
Because it's not really available. If you're a lot of the grants were targeted at low business rate venues, and if you're in London, 75% of the businesses are paying rates that were so high level, you didn't qualify for the grants.
Right, so you're almost kind of a victim of your own success.
We really tried.
Okay. And we heard from Rishi Sunak that he'd unveiled another relief package at the beginning of the year. So first week of Jan, there was a £4.6 billion relief package, grants of up to £9,000 for the hospitality sector and those businesses affected in retail and in leisure. And then there was extra funding given to local authorities as well, local councils, to help assist businesses. So even with that, you've not seen a single bit of help from the government?
The headlines are great. I mean, again, that 4.6 billion is half of the 9 billion that he promised, I think, 3 measures ago for the job retention bonus scheme, which was supposed to take effect from the end of January, which was to support businesses with a £1,000 per employee payment for jobs they've kept until the end of January. So that's been dropped. That 9 billion has been dropped. And he's come up with another 4.6 billion. So the headline looks like a good contribution, but it doesn't really add up to anything. And, we don't qualify for a lot of these grants, but I'm hearing from a lot of colleagues that do, that, months later, they're still not being paid. I don't know why the local authorities have been so slow in some cases. Some have been very good at paying. That's kept some businesses going. But I think we're going to see an enormous number of liquidations and job losses at the end of it. And, what's left of our industry will hopefully be the strongest businesses that have been able to come through this. And hopefully they'll be able to add to the cultural capital and the social and community of our country and continue to contribute to the economy. I mean, I can just give you one figure. In 2019, the UK hospitality industry contributed £135 billion to the UK economy. We're very important in terms of that and what that pays for in our country. And after the banking crash 2008, we were for a period of time responsible for creating 1 in 3 new jobs. So hospitality is vital for the bounce back as well. And we've got to see more support for our businesses and our industries and our industry as a whole. Furlough has been great, but it's not enough to support the businesses that employ those people.
Jonathan, the Eat Out to Help Out scheme that began in August and was launched by Rishi Sunak was applauded at the time. But I think a lot of people feel quite angrily towards it because they feel like it was inappropriate and, perhaps wasn't a great idea when you bearing in mind that a second wave of the pandemic, there was a lockdown, wasn't there, October, November time. A lot of people looked back at that Eat Out to Help Out and said, well, that was completely inappropriate. So even though it garnered really good headlines at the time, it has come under criticism, hasn't it? Do you believe that something like that would be a good idea to do again, or is that now sort of a tainted plan?
Well, it was a great idea and it didn't lead to any increase in infections. We know that from Public Health England data. That's absolutely clear. But I think there's been a lot of politics and criticism and kind of like a sidelining of Rishi because he was getting perhaps a bit too big for his boots, maybe. I don't know how it all works. And I was told that we were going to see a second month of that in either in January or February because those were the quiet months and, a lot of seasonal businesses need help then, not in August when it's, high season for a lot of companies. So it would be great to see that back, but I think you're absolutely right. It's kind of tainted now, which is a shame because it was a very successful scheme for a lot of businesses. I don't see it coming back again, but you never know really. Things change so often and so quickly in this pandemic. It's hard to know what to deal with next or what may come up next. We'll see.
It must be incredibly tough. You've lost 3 venues already. How does this feel for you personally? You are fighting like mad to try and get some help from the government, but just for you personally, you're also having to shut down businesses.
Yeah, and in my case, one of them I've had for 18 years. Milk and Honey in Soho has been that. I've had that business for 18 years, and I think I'm quite sanguine about the eventual failure of business. But what I don't recover from, or which I don't accept readily, is the loss of jobs. And I've worked with some great people, and some of the people who work with me at Street Feast have been with us from virtually the very start about 7 years ago. And they've lost their jobs in many cases, and we've not been able to keep them on furlough. We've had to liquidate one of our businesses, and they're all trying to find other work now and other things to do. So that's what annoys me the most. The Hospitality Union set up to try and save 2 million jobs in hospitality because we thought that was at risk. These are young people starting out in life. In most cases, people who work in hospitality now, fantastic characters, lively, friendly, personable. Great, they live to serve people, and it's just they create a really brilliant atmosphere. And I love my industry because of that. And these people have just been kind of like, I don't know, in many cases, just cast to one side and forgotten. And I don't know how they bounce back as individuals. And that's the thing that's upset me the most. And, I'll be fine. I'm old enough and I've been around long enough. I'll be fine, but it's those guys that I worry about the most. And I think we need to see a bit more support for businesses so that businesses can support their people more.
Do you not worry about how you might bounce back? Because this must be taking a toll on you. It must be.
Yeah, I think I have to say during this current lockdown, I'm starting to feel it a bit more than the first one, and the second one kind of like I wasn't even in the country at the time actually, but the first one everyone kind of like knuckled down and tried to make the most of it, and it was novel. But this one, for the first, I'm pretty resilient as is my industry, and pretty resourceful again as is my industry, but this is becoming very tough to get through. I've got nothing to reopen at the moment. When we are allowed to reopen, I've got to start again from scratch. I've been in the industry for 23, 24 years now. I've kind of seen it all in some respects. And at the moment, I've got no idea what I'm going to do next. My best estimate is that I may be able to open something again, perhaps in 6 months' time. But I can't start negotiating deals or agreeing rent terms or leases or etc., or raising funds or committing people to a new venture because we just don't know where we stand. And who knows what will happen a year from now? We may be all closed down again if this lockdown is the approach that's going to be continually adopted every time a virus reappears or there's another wave. It seems to me that post-vaccinations we need to start to accept a way of living with and working around the vaccine rather than just completely locking down every time. We really need to protect the vulnerable more rather than just locking everyone away for periods of time when we don't know what else to do. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, Jonathan, I do appreciate you speaking to us. Thank you very much for your thoughts on this. Of course, not only the owner of many establishments, many of which she's had to say goodbye to, but also the man behind the Hospitality Union as well, desperately trying to work with the government to try and save as many hospitality businesses as possible. Jonathan Downey, thank you for joining us here on Times Radio.